When night falls over Greystone Park, the statues don't stay still. They breathe, they watch, and they remember. The breathing statue follows Eli and Clara as they uncover the haunting truth buried beneath marble and mist. Each step into the park leads them deeper into a nightmare where stone is flesh and forgotten souls await their return. Dare to watch, but don't blink. The night had a strange weight in Greystone Park. A kind of pressure hung in the air, as if the sky were leaning in just a little too close. The lamplights flickered despite the absence of wind. In the silence, broken only by the distant buzz of insects, even the statues seemed to lean forward, listening. Eli Mercer walked the narrow gravel path with his hands deep in the pockets of his worn jacket. He wasn't supposed to be out this late, but something had drawn him here. A restlessness that didn't belong to him had crept beneath his skin. Each crunch of gravel beneath his boots sounded too loud, too distinct. He slowed, uneasy. To his left, a row of stone figures loomed among the trees, each one poised, frozen in odd stances. A woman draped in robes, head tilted as if listening. A kneeling child, hands clasped in prayer. A cloaked figure whose face was lost in shadows. Eli had walked past them before during daylight, barely sparing them a glance. But tonight, their silence screamed. Then he heard it, a whisper, faint, almost imagined, like breath on glass. Eli stopped, his breath caught. He turned slowly, but no one was there. Behind him, a statue of a boy holding a dove stood motionless. The marble eyes stared ahead, blank and unblinking. The dove's wings looked ready to take flight, caught in eternal stillness. Eli's gaze lingered. Something was off. He leaned in. A low wheeze, soft and damp, rose from the base of the statue. It was the sound of someone, or something, exhaling. Not once, not a passing breath, but a rhythmic, steady breathing. In, out. He stepped back. A chill slithered down his spine. "Hello?" he called, his voice cracking. The park answered with silence. Then came the sound of shifting gravel, not under his feet. Eli turned in a slow circle, eyes scanning the dim path. The shadows played tricks. One of the statues, the cloaked one, seemed closer than before. He blinked. No, it hadn't moved. Couldn't have. But when he turned away, he heard it again. The gravel shifting, a stone dragging against stone. His heart pounded. This isn't happening. But it was. He started walking faster, his breath hitching. Behind him, footsteps echoed, deliberate, heavy. He turned sharply. Nothing. Only the rows of statues, watching, or pretending to. He broke into a jog. His legs moved on instinct, fueled by terror he hadn't yet accepted. The sound of breathing grew louder, not from behind, from all around. It echoed off trees, from the ground, from the marble mouths that should not have lungs. At the center of the park stood the largest statue. Eli had seen it 1,000 times. A winged figure with a solemn face, arms raised as if in mourning. By day it was noble, by night it was a judge. Tonight its eyes glowed faintly in the dark, not reflected, not imagined, glowed. Eli stumbled backward, falling hard on the gravel. His hands scraped raw. He scrambled up, gasping. "Stay away," he whispered. The statue didn't move, but somewhere deep within its chest, a wet, drawn-out inhale sounded, like breath passing through a cracked throat. The ground trembled, just a little. Then, silence. Eli ran. He didn't stop until he reached the gate of the park. He clutched the iron bars, panting, cold sweat clinging to him like a second skin. Behind him, the statues stood still, silent. But in the quiet, he could still hear them breathing. The next morning, sunlight painted Greystone Park in gold. Joggers passed the statues without notice. Children fed ducks in the nearby pond. Everything looked normal. But Eli didn't return. He stayed in his apartment, curtains drawn, pacing the floor. The night had stained something in him, something he couldn't wash out. He opened his laptop, hands trembling, and searched Greystone Park statue legend. A few results popped up. Old forums, urban legends, the Marble Watchers. They breathe at night. If you hear them too clearly, they know you've seen them. Another post, never stop if you feel watched. Keep walking, never blink by the fountain. His phone buzzed. A message from his friend Clara. "You okay? You missed class again. We're heading to the park tonight. Come with?" Eli stared at the message. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. Behind him, a faint wheeze slipped through the window. He turned. No one was there. Just the rustle of leaves outside and that soft, ragged breath, steady and too close. Clara Sandell zipped up her hoodie and tightened her ponytail as she stepped onto the cracked sidewalk that led into Greystone Park. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a bruised sky and a deepening veil of mist. Streetlights hummed overhead, flickering faintly as if struggling to stay awake. She glanced down at her phone. No reply from Eli. 3 messages, unread. That wasn't like him. She and Eli had known each other since sophomore year. He was the quiet one, the one who always noticed things others didn't. But lately he had seemed off, since the last time he went into this park. Clara stuffed the phone into her pocket and entered the gates. The chill in the air wasn't sharp, but it crept under her clothes like fingers made of smoke. The trees stood like sentinels on either side of the path, tall and unmoving. Somewhere in the distance, a raven croaked, its cry short and broken. Clara paused, turning her head. The statues loomed just ahead. She had never liked them, not really. Something about their poses always felt unnatural, too purposeful. Like they were waiting for something or someone. Her boots crunched on the gravel path as she passed the first figure, a girl in a bonnet, holding a bouquet of stone flowers. Her face was soft, almost sorrowful. The sculptor had carved tear trails down her cheeks. Clara moved past quickly. The second statue, a man in a suit with a shattered briefcase at his feet, had cracks running down his face, spiderwebbing into his eyes. She stopped. She didn't remember that crack being there before. Then again, she hadn't paid much attention before either. The third statue. Clara froze. It was the cloaked figure, the one Eli had mentioned once in passing. In a voice too low for comfort, she couldn't see the face beneath the hood, but its posture was hunched now, leaning forward slightly. Was it always like that? Clara took a cautious step closer. The wind didn't blow, but leaves scattered around her feet. A low, rasping sound reached her ears. It wasn't close, not yet. It sounded like someone trying to breathe through damp cloth. In, then out. Slow, labored. Clara stepped back. A twig snapped behind her. She whirled. The girl with the bonnet now looked slightly to the left. No, that's not possible. Her face had been angled down. She remembered. She knew she remembered. A second breath came. Closer. Clara's skin prickled. She didn't run. Not yet. She forced herself to look again, eyes darting from statue to statue. None had moved. Not visibly, but the stillness was a lie. A performance. She pulled out her phone. Still no reply from Eli. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. 1 ring, 2, voicemail. Eli, it's me. I'm in the park. Something's not right here. I think I saw. A sharp click. The phone screen went black. She hadn't dropped it. The battery hadn't died. It just shut off. A cold breath tickled her neck. She screamed, spinning violently, but there was no one there except the cloaked statue. Closer now. Much closer. Clara staggered backward. She wasn't imagining it. Its feet had shifted. One booted toe now pressed against a fallen leaf that hadn't been there before. She turned and ran. Gravel sprayed behind her as she sprinted down the path, heart hammering against her ribs like a warning drum. Statues blurred past her, their faces melting into streaks of gray and shadow. Then the breathing returned, louder, surrounding her, above, below, inside. It was as though the park itself had lungs. She tripped. The ground rushed up, her knees scraped open, blood warming her tights. But the breathing stopped. Total silence fell like a curtain. She sat up slowly. All the statues around her were watching. Stop. She didn't know how, but she felt it. Their eyes were open inside, staring out from cold stone, unblinking, endless. Clara stumbled to her feet, limped toward the exit, refusing to look back. Her vision blurred with tears she hadn't realized were there. When she reached the iron gate, she gasped as it stood closed. It wasn't locked earlier. She rattled it. Nothing. Behind her, the footsteps began. Stone on gravel, deliberate. She didn't turn. The keys in her pocket, useless. The gate wasn't locked with a key. It just wasn't opening. The sound of gravel stopped. A whisper floated to her ear. Do you see us now? She screamed again, raw and broken, as the gate creaked, then opened. She fell through and landed on the sidewalk outside. When she looked up, the gate had already begun to close. Click. Silence. She didn't look back. She ran. Eli opened the door before she knocked. He looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, lips chapped. You went, he said. Clara didn't answer. She pushed past him, slammed the door shut, and locked it 3 times. They're alive, she whispered. Eli nodded. They breathe, he replied. They sat in silence for a long while. Outside, night deepened. But in the distance, just beyond the thin walls of the apartment, something exhaled. Long, wet, watching. A morning after Clara's escape was quieter than usual. Not the kind of quiet that brought calm, but the kind that made everything feel like it was holding its breath. The curtains in Eli's apartment remained drawn, shutting out the sun, and inside, shadows draped over every surface like waiting arms. Neither of them had slept. Not really. Their words had faded into silence during the night, and now they sat in separate corners of the room, each listening for the same thing. That breath, that slow, dragging breath that had followed them into the dark. "I heard it again," Clara finally said, her voice hoarse. Eli looked up from the notepad he'd been scribbling in, his fingers stained with pen ink, the pages filled with frantic, looping handwriting. "I never stopped hearing it," he replied. Clara shivered and rubbed her arms. "It's not just the breathing. When I ran, they moved. They moved fast, but when I turned around, they were still, like nothing happened." "I saw the same thing the night before," Eli muttered. "One moment they were across the path, then right behind me. The air got thicker every time I blinked." She swallowed hard. "It's like they're playing with time, or with us." Eli stood and crossed to his cluttered desk. From underneath a stack of old books and unopened mail, he pulled out a faded, leather-bound journal. "My grandfather kept this," he said, thumbing through the pages. "He used to be a groundskeeper for Greystone Park in the 70s. Never talked about it. After he died, my mom gave this to me." Clara leaned forward as he opened to a marked page. The ink was faded, but the writing was frantic. "They don't like to be watched. They only move when no one sees. But I heard them behind me, always behind me." Further down, "One statue vanished last night. I counted 13. There were only 12 this morning. No one else sees it." Clara stared at the entry. Her hands trembled. "How long has this been happening?" Eli flipped through more pages. "Years. Decades, maybe. Every few pages, more notes. Always about movement, breathing, missing statues." "But why now?" Clara asked. "Why us?" Eli didn't answer. A sudden knock at the door made them both flinch. 3 slow taps, then silence. They stared at the door. Another 3 taps. Not rushed, measured, like a ritual. Clara stood, heart racing. "Don't open it!" Eli nodded, but he crept toward the peephole. He looked through, and his face went pale. "There's no one there." Clara backed away from the door. "Check again." Eli blinked, pressed his eye closer. "There's something. I think it's the shadow of a—" Knock, louder now, directly on the peephole. Eli stumbled back. Something scraped against the other side. A slow dragging sound, like fingernails of stone across wood. Then came the breathing. Through the keyhole, a sound like wet lungs fighting for air. In. Pause. Out. Faint, but close. Too close. "We need to leave," Clara whispered. Eli grabbed the journal, shoved it into his backpack, and nodded. "Not just the apartment. We need to get out of this town." As they opened the back door, the wind howled unnaturally, not in gusts, but in a long, continuous moan, like something crying without a mouth. The fence that bordered the apartment's alley rattled gently. Beyond it, they saw nothing, just the trees lining the end of the road. They ran, down the cracked sidewalk, through narrow alleys. Every time they passed a fence, they heard it. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, mimicking their own pace. When they stopped, it stopped. When they ran, it chased. They turned a corner and ducked into a gas station. breathless. Inside, everything was bright and sterile. An old man behind the counter looked up slowly from a crossword puzzle. "You kids all right?" he asked. Eli nodded quickly. "We just needed a break." The old man studied them with wary eyes. "You been near the park?" Clara blinked. "Why?" He leaned forward, voice low. "Those statues, they weren't always there." Clara's voice cracked. "What do you mean?" "They showed up one night in '74, he said. No trucks, no workers. One day, there was just grass. Next day, stone." Eli exchanged a glance with Clara. "They ever breathe?" he asked. The old man didn't flinch. "Only when you listen." That night, back at Clara's house, they double-locked every door and window. Clara stood in the hallway, staring at the mirror near the stairs. "Do you hear it?" she asked softly. Eli listened. Nothing. Then, inhale, exhale. He turned, eyes wide. From behind the mirror came the faint sound of footsteps. Not on tile, not on wood. Stone on stone, grinding, crawling, moving closer. The mirror in Clara's hallway remained silent the next morning, but the silence itself felt unnatural. It wasn't the stillness of peace. It was the hush that came after a scream. Clara hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it. The weight of a gaze pressing into her skin. Not human, not kind. Something ancient. Something that didn't blink. Eli had dozed off for a short while on the couch, his grandfather's journal clutched to his chest like a relic. But he woke with a jolt when Clara whispered his name. "They're still watching," she said. He nodded, rubbing his eyes. "I know." She turned to the hallway again. The mirror reflected only her and the corridor behind her. But she remembered the sound, the grinding, the breath, the presence just behind the glass. "We need to find out where they came from," Eli said. "What they are." Clara exhaled slowly. "There was something. That statue in the park. The robed one. I swear, it was the same shape I saw in the mirror." Eli opened the journal again, flipping through the pages. He stopped at an entry written in a shaky hand. "They found the first one buried beneath the old fountain. Said it was older than the town, older than anything here. When they pulled it out, everything changed." Clara leaned in. "The fountain, that's where it started?" "I think so," Eli said. "We need to go back." Clara stared at him. "Back to the park?" Eli met her eyes. "If we want answers, yes." They returned to Greystone Park just before sundown. The sky was bruised with purple clouds, and the light filtered through the trees in long, dying beams. Shadows stretched like fingers. The statues were still in their places, waiting, always waiting. Clara's breath caught in her throat when she saw the girl with the bonnet. Her head was tilted slightly again, in a different direction than before. "She moved," Clara whispered. Eli didn't answer. He stared at the winged figure at the center of the park. Its arms were stretched skyward, eyes blank, but somehow accusatory. They made their way to the old fountain. It hadn't run in years. Dry leaves filled the basin, and cracks webbed across its stone edges. Moss clung to the base like veins. "Help me," Eli said. They cleared the debris, revealing a rusted hatch beneath the dead foliage. Metal scratched against stone as Eli forced it open. A deep breath of air rose up from the black hole beneath. Not wind, not ventilation. It was warm and moist, like something had exhaled from below. Clara gagged. God, it smells like rot. They climbed down the narrow ladder, the darkness swallowing them step by step. The flashlight flickered as they descended, and each flicker made the shadows twitch. The air grew thick, wet, breathing again. The bottom revealed a tunnel. Stone walls slick with mildew, lined with deep grooves as if carved by nails. They followed the path in silence, and then they heard it. Tap, tap, footsteps behind them. Not human footsteps. These were slow, dragging, too heavy, like stone limbs testing old ground. Clara turned around, flashlight trembling. Nothing. But the sound came again. Tap, tap, scrape. They moved faster. At the end of the tunnel, the walls opened into a chamber. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it, a headless statue. Clara stepped closer. It was made of the same pale marble as the others, but its arms were twisted behind its back, wrists bound with stone rope. The journal had one last note scrawled at the bottom of the page. Do not unbind it. The others obey it. They breathe because of it. If it wakes, they all will. Clara backed away. We need to go. Eli turned. The tunnel behind them was gone. Not collapsed, gone. Where the entrance had been, there was now smooth wall, seamless, as if it had never been open. A sound filled the chamber. Breathing. But this time, it wasn't rhythmic. It was frantic. And then came the whisper, "You're alone now." A grinding noise echoed behind them. The headless statue's fingers twitched, one at a time. Slow, deliberate. Clara screamed. The pedestal cracked down the center. Eli grabbed her hand. They ran, but there was no exit. Only the sound of stone dragging along the floor. Closer, louder. The walls seemed to pulse with breath, as if alive. Then they saw it. A sliver of light behind the pedestal. A crack in the wall. Eli threw himself against it. The stone shifted, just enough. They slipped through, scraping skin, tearing clothes, crawling toward the light like animals. And then they were out, back in the park. The sun had just vanished behind the trees. But something was different. The statues had changed places. The cloaked one now stood at the edge of the fountain, and its head had turned, just slightly, toward them, watching. The fog rolled in thick that night, swallowing Greystone Park and everything around it in a soupy, choking silence. Lights from passing cars blurred into dull smears. Branches reached like skeletal fingers through the white haze, but nothing moved, not visibly. Clara sat by her bedroom window, eyes fixed on the street lamp outside. She couldn't see the base of it anymore, just the upper third, a dim glow straining to pierce the mist. Her fingers clutched the edge of the windowsill until her knuckles turned white. "It's back," she whispered, "just like last time." Eli stood behind her, silent. The journal trembled in his hands. point. The last entry had changed. Not added to, changed. The handwriting was still Eli's grandfather's, but the words were different. The statues walk in fog. They need it. The fog hides what they are. But if it speaks your name, it's too late. Eli had read that line 10 times, each time hoping it would say something else. But it never did. What if it already knows us? He asked. Clara didn't answer. She was listening. The silence outside was too perfect, too controlled. Then, faintly, a voice. Not from the street, not from the window, from within the fog. Eli. The name came slow, drawn out, as if the fog itself was exhaling it. Eli's mouth went dry. He stepped back from the window. It's mimicking. It's learning. Another whisper followed. This time, Clara. She covered her ears, but the sound wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside, behind the mirror. They turned at the same time. The hallway stretched long and dark behind them. The mirror, dusty and old, reflected the space perfectly, except for one thing. A silhouette stood just outside the frame's edge. It wasn't visible in the hallway, only in the reflection, still, breathing. Its chest rose and fell in long, painful movements. Its arms hung limply at its sides, but the fingers twitched, tapping gently against its marble thighs. Clara's breath caught. That statue, it followed us home. No, Eli said quietly. It never left. They fled the house with nothing but the journal and a flashlight. The fog had thickened. It clung to them, cold and damp, carrying that same hollow breathing. Every few steps, they heard it behind them. Footsteps on concrete, slow and heavy. But when they turned, nothing. The park wasn't far, but the fog made every block stretch. Houses blurred together. Trees leaned too close, and the sound of names, their names, kept coming. Eli. Clara. Eli. Each whisper grew clearer, more confident, like it was getting used to their tongues, like it was practicing. They reached the edge of Greystone Park. The iron gate stood ajar, just wide enough for one person to slip through. Neither of them wanted to move first. Why here? Clara finally asked. Why do they always bring us back here? Because this is where it sleeps, Eli said, and something is waking it up. They entered. The fog seemed denser inside. The statues were hard to see, just vague outlines among the trees, but they were there, watching, waiting. Then a new sound, not breathing, not footsteps, a dragging spontaneously. Stone on stone, like something too large to walk was crawling through the earth. The fog behind the fountain shifted. A shape emerged. The bound statue. It had found its way to the surface. The head was still gone, but in its chest something pulsed. A red glow deep and buried beneath the marble. It beat like a heart. "Do you hear that?" Clara whispered. Eli listened. It wasn't just the heart. It was voices. Hundreds of them, all whispering, "Watch, watch, watch." They backed away, but the ground trembled. The statues lining the path turned their heads, slow and grinding, one by one. All eyes on Clara. Not Eli, only Clara. Then the fog spoke again, but it didn't say her name this time. It said, "Welcome back." Clara collapsed to her knees, clutching her head. "No, I've never been here before." The whispers twisted. "Yes, you have. You forgot, but we remember." Eli tried to pull her up, but her eyes were distant, like something ancient had been awakened inside her. A memory not hers, a name not hers. The heartbeat inside the bound statue grew louder. Boom, boom. Statues began to move, one step, then another. The fog pulsed with them. Clara's voice broke as she stared into the mist. They weren't just statues, they were people, once, bound to stone. Eli froze. The truth settled like ice in his veins. "They were sacrificed," Clara said, "buried, forgotten." Then she looked at him, and her voice wasn't hers. "They want me to stay." Eli shook his head. "No, you're coming with me." But the statues were circling now, closing in, and the fog whispered her name again, softly, gently, as if calling her home. The sky above Greystone Park was a suffocating black, not the kind of darkness that gently blanketed the earth, but the kind that felt like it was pressing down, squeezing the breath from everything beneath it. No moon, no stars, just fog, thick and glistening, curling through the air like smoke from a fire that would never stop burning. Eli's hands trembled as he gripped Clara's shoulders, shaking her, calling her name. She wasn't responding, not really. Her eyes were open, pupils wide and glassy, fixed on something in the fog that he couldn't see. "They want me to stay," she whispered again, her voice flat, hollow. "No," Eli said, trying to pull her to her feet. "You're not staying. We're getting out. Right now." But Clara didn't move. The statues were circling, just out of reach, their shapes barely visible through the shifting mist. Their faces, though made of stone, seemed to change when no one was looking. The soft tap of their feet on damp ground echoed with a rhythm that didn't belong to anything human. And louder than that came the cracking, a sound like marble splitting under pressure. Pop, crack, grind. Eli turned toward the sound, and his breath caught. One of the statues, the man with the cracked briefcase, was changing. A long fissure ran from his temple to his jaw, splitting his stone face in two. The edges pulsed faintly, glowing with red light from somewhere deep inside. As Eli watched, another crack formed across the statue's mouth, and with a final deafening snap, the jaw dropped open. And inside, it wasn't hollow. Wet red tissue pulsed beneath the stone. Not flesh exactly, not muscle, but something in between. Something that shouldn't have been alive. The statue exhaled. A hot breath hit Eli's face, carrying the scent of rotting leaves, ash, and something older. Earth left undisturbed for centuries. Clara gasped. That breath had reached her too. It stirred something in her. Suddenly she stood, slow and shaking, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. "Clara," Eli pleaded, "don't listen to it. Don't breathe it in." But her lips moved on their own. "They remember me." Eli grabbed her hand, and this time she didn't resist. Together they ran, dodging through the trees and the unmoving eyes. Every statue they passed seemed to twitch in their wake. A finger, a turning head, a whisper. Behind them, the cracking grew louder. Crack, 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 like dozens of ancient mouths trying to open for the first time in centuries. They reached the edge of the park. The iron gate still rusted, but now covered in handprints. Stone gray smudges that hadn't been there before. Eli pushed against it, and it opened with a metallic groan. They stumbled into the street, gasping, but the fog followed. It spilled over the fence like water, slow and steady. Back at Eli's apartment, the lights flickered violently as he shut and locked the door behind them. The journal sat on the table, open to the last page. Eli looked down. There were new words there. He hadn't written them. One must crack, for the rest to awaken. One must remember, for the rest to return. Clara dropped to the floor, pressing her hands against her ears. It's in my head, it's in my blood. Eli knelt beside her. They're trying to use you. No, she whispered. They already are. She lifted her head, and that's when Eli saw it. A faint line ran across her cheek, a thin, pale crack in her skin. His voice failed. She touched it, confused. What is it? He couldn't speak, because the crack was spreading. At midnight, Clara lay curled on the couch, the crack now branching toward her jawline. She hadn't said a word in over an hour. Eli sat beside the window, watching the street. The fog was no longer just outside. It was inside, creeping through the floorboards, rising from the vents. Then came the sound again, a deep, ragged breath from the hallway mirror. Eli stood and turned slowly. The reflection had changed. Where there should have been an empty hallway, there now stood a statue, one he hadn't seen before. It was taller, more detailed. Its face looked like Clara, but cracked, bleeding red light from beneath the surface. The statue blinked once. The mirror shattered. The shattered mirror reflected nothing now, just fragments, jagged shards strewn across the hallway floor. Each piece caught the dim ceiling light and glinted like a blade. Eli stood frozen, his breath shallow, watching the empty frame where Clara's stone reflection had been. The silence that followed was worse than the crack. It buzzed beneath his skin, deep in his ears, like something humming just beyond the range of hearing. Behind him, Clara stirred. He turned quickly, afraid of what he'd see. She was sitting upright now on the couch, wide-eyed. Her pupils were blown wide, but not with fear. Something colder lived there now. Her hands trembled, not from shock, but from strain, as if she were holding something in, or holding something back. "Clara," Eli said softly, "can you hear me?" She nodded once, slow and stiff. Her lips parted, and her voice came out rasped and low. "They want me to go to the fountain." Eli felt the words sink into his stomach like a stone. "Why?" he asked. "They said I left something there. A piece of myself. They want to give it back." Eli crossed the room in 2 strides. "You are not going back there. You saw what happened. You felt it. If you go back, I don't think you'll come out the same." Clara's hands moved toward her face. Her fingertips grazed the pale crack that had spread further down her cheek. She winced. I think it's already too late, she whispered. The walk to the park was silent. The fog had not lifted since the night before. It had grown denser, more alive. It wrapped around street signs and phone poles, tugging at their edges. The world beyond the park felt like it had faded, as if it no longer mattered. Even the sound of their footsteps on the pavement seemed thinner, unreal. They reached the gates. This time they were wide open, no creak, no resistance. The park welcomed them. The statues were waiting. Dozens of them, lining the paths, unmoving yet unmistakably alive. The cloaked figure, the girl with the bonnet, the headless one with bound arms, all in new positions, watching with eyes that never blinked. Eli and Clara moved down the gravel path toward the heart of the park, the fountain. It stood dry and broken, its cracked basin ringed with weeds and dead leaves. But in the center, where water once flowed, a new figure had emerged. A marble form with no eyes, no mouth. Only a hollow hole where the face should be. Clara's breath caught. "That's mine," she said. Eli stepped in front of her. "No, you don't need to go closer." But Clara was already walking, drawn. As she reached the edge of the fountain, the fog around her thickened, swirling in slow coils. The statues shifted, not visibly, but when Eli looked again, they were closer, much closer. Clara climbed into the basin. Her fingers grazed the faceless statue's surface. It was warm. Behind Eli, a sound emerged, stone dragging across stone. A groan, a breath. Then, one by one, the statues began to blink. Not slowly, not lazily, synchronously. Their eyes opened and closed in rhythm, and each blink made the world flicker. Like a dying light bulb, Clara froze. "Don't blink, Eli," she whispered. "What? Don't blink! Not here, not now!" Eli's eyes stung. He forced them open wide, the air burning against his corneas. Then the voice returned, soft, layered, hundreds of mouths speaking as one. "One of us, one of us, one of us." Clara's body shook violently. The crack on her cheek split deeper, red light pulsing from underneath. Her hands reached for the faceless statue, and then stopped. Eli stepped into the fountain and grabbed her wrist. "I'm not losing you." But her skin was turning cold. The texture of her fingers roughened under his grip. Porous, hard, marble. "Clara, fight it!" Her eyes darted toward his, a flicker of pain returning, just for a moment. "I remember now," she whispered, "what they made me forget." Behind them, the blinking continued. Blink, flicker, blink. Stone fingers reached over the edge of the fountain. "They were people once," she said. "They were made to forget, trapped inside stone. And when they remembered, they cracked, they split, until only the voice remained." Eli pulled her close, shaking. "Then don't remember, please." Clara looked up. Her eyes shimmered. "I have to," she said, "because it's not just me. They'll take someone else if I go back. They'll stop looking." Eli shook his head violently. "No, you don't know that." "Yes, I do." She stepped back from him into the hollow center of the fountain, where the faceless statue stood. She placed her hand on its chest. The ground shuddered. Then the face of the statue shifted, melted, and took hers. Her features etched themselves into the stone like smoke pressed into glass. Her body stiffened, and Clara didn't move again. Eli screamed. The fog swallowed the sound. The statues stopped blinking. They turned in unison and walked away. Eli did not remember walking home. The fog had followed him out of the park like a wounded animal, slinking through the trees, brushing his heels. But by the time he reached his apartment, it had vanished. Not lifted, vanished. The air was still and sharp, like the world had stopped breathing. He closed the door behind him, slowly, quietly, as if afraid to wake something already awake. His clothes were damp with dew. The scent of moss and crumbling leaves clung to his skin. And on the edge of his shoulder, just beneath the collar of his shirt, he could still feel it. The touch, the weightless, ice-cold press of stone fingers that had gripped him just before Clara stepped into the fountain. They hadn't held him back, just reminded him, you were there too. He didn't take his jacket off. He didn't shower. He sat on the floor, back to the wall, and stared at nothing until the first light of morning pushed through the blinds. But even in the daylight, he couldn't stop hearing it. Tap, 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 like stone knuckles rapping gently against the inside of a wall. Not demanding, not angry, just patient, waiting. He returned to the park at dusk, not because he wanted to, because he had to. Clara's face had not left his mind. Not in memory, not in dreams. The moment her features bled into the faceless statue, the way the stone shimmered as if welcoming her back, the silence that followed. The others had stopped, had turned away, but the one with her face had stared at him, and still did. Eli walked the path again, this time alone. The gravel no longer crunched under his boots. It sank, as if the park was swallowing his weight, pulling him down with every step. The statues watched. Every single one of them had shifted again. Their necks craned toward the center, toward her. He approached the fountain. There she was, still. The statue wore her face, yes, but there was more. A hairline crack ran from her left temple down to her jaw, glowing faintly beneath the surface. And her eyes, they weren't empty. They followed him. Eli staggered back, breath catching in his throat. The stone face blinked. He turned to run, but a hand stopped him. Cold, fingers on his shoulder. He didn't turn immediately, couldn't, but the grip tightened. He spun. There was no one, but on his shoulder, a perfect gray smudge. 4 slender prints and a thumb. Stone dust, fresh. Back home, he didn't sleep. He read the journal again. Every word, every page. And there, near the back, written in unfamiliar script, the statues mark those who see. They mark with touch, with breath. Once marked, you carry the echo. They do not forget, even when you do. Eli touched his shoulder. It was warm, too warm. That night, the dreams returned. He stood in the park again, but it was deeper somehow. The trees taller, the statues larger, moving slowly in the corners of his vision. Clara's statue stood in the center, her face cracked open. From within, something pulsed, not light, something with weight. A heart, Stone fingers reached from the fountain, gripping the edge, pulling up another figure. Hollow eyes, widened mouth, it looked like him, and it whispered, "We are not finished." Eli woke with a scream, sweat-soaked and shivering. He staggered to the mirror. The reflection stared back, pale, haggard, and then the breath, hot, wet at his neck. He turned. Nothing. But when he faced the mirror again, the reflection smiled. Only the reflection, and behind his image, stone hands rested gently on his shoulders. Eli didn't open his eyes immediately when he woke. The room felt wrong. Not unfamiliar, just altered. The kind of change you sense before you see it. The air was heavier, as if the walls had swollen inward during the night. There was a sound, a steady dripping from somewhere behind the drywall, rhythmic like a leaking pipe. But he didn't own a pipe there. He had checked before, twice. He opened his eyes slowly. The reflection in the mirror across the room was already watching him. It was his face, same clothes, same hollow stare. But behind him, in the reflection only, the room was crowded. Statues filled the corners, cracked, watching. Silent, he turned. The room was empty. The mirror lied, or maybe the mirror told the truth, and the waking world was the lie. He hadn't left the apartment since the night Clara became one of them. The fog hadn't come back, but that didn't bring peace. The absence of the fog felt more like permission, the kind you don't ask for but are given anyway. Eli no longer slept in the bedroom. He had dragged a mattress into the living room, kept the lights on at all times. But the lights had begun to flicker at midnight, always at midnight. The flickering came with a sound, a pulse, not electricity, not wind, a heartbeat. At first, it was faint. Then each night it grew stronger, closer, like it had learned the rhythm of his breathing and timed itself to match. Last night, it had stopped beating, only when his own heart did. For a moment, both were silent. He had felt that silence in his teeth, behind his eyes, in the hollows of his ribs. It wasn't just in his head anymore. It was in his body, inside. At 2:17 a.m., Eli stood in front of the mirror, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. The reflection had changed again. It was him, yes, but the chest was split down the middle, the skin pulled apart to reveal an empty cavity, hollow, yet somehow still breathing. He lifted his shirt. Just to check, no crack, no mark, only sweat, slick and cold on his skin. But as he stared deeper, something within the glass pulsed again, slow, wet. A faint thump echoed behind the wall. Then came the whisper, not from the mirror, not from the air, from within him. It was never hers, it was always meant for you. Eli's legs buckled. He fell to the floor, panting, trying to claw the voice from his mind. But the pulse didn't stop. It beat louder now, hungry, expectant, and behind his ribs. He felt warmth, not fever, not sickness. Something moving, something beginning to wake. He returned to Greystone Park one last time. It was different now. The fog hadn't returned, but the shadows had thickened. Trees leaned closer together. The gravel path had vanished, replaced by smooth black soil that swallowed his footsteps. No birds, no wind, just the sound of his own breath and the faint dragging scrape of stone. The statues were waiting, dozens now, hundreds, forming a wide circle around the dry fountain. Clara's statue stood in the center. Her stone chest was open, cracked neatly down the sternum. Hollow and empty, as if something inside had been taken or removed by force. Eli stepped closer. His body moved on its own. His hands lifted, shaking, reaching for the void within her. And from behind him, the circle of statues breathed. In, out, in, out. The rhythm grew louder. The air shimmered with vibration, dust lifted from the soil like ash. Eli pressed his hand to Clara's chest, and something inside him responded. His heart, no longer beating, yet pulsing. Then came the pain, white hot, searing down his spine and across his ribs. His chest opened, not with blood or bone, but with sound. A crack, a pop, a long, deliberate splitting. He screamed. No voice came out, only breath, a sound he had come to know too well. From his open chest, a light flickered. The statues turned. Clara's statue smiled, the hollow inside her filled with his light, and Eli began to turn to stone, from the feet up, slowly, precisely, like fingers sculpting him from the inside. He looked down. The hand still pressed to her chest was no longer his. It was gray, cold, fingers of stone. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, he felt peace. Just before the silence took him, he heard it. The heartbeat, still there, but no longer his. The park was quiet again. No fog, no wind, no sound. Just rows upon rows of statues, still as death and colder than the earth that birthed them. Clara stood in the center of the fountain, her stone skin smoothed by time, but not erasure. The crack that had once split her cheek was gone, healed, seamless. Only her eyes betrayed her. Those wide, sorrowful eyes that saw without moving, that remembered without blinking. Across from her, Eli stood. But he was no longer Eli. His transformation had completed. The veins of marble ran deep beneath his flesh, locking his body into a pose he did not choose. Arms outstretched, chest open. The hollow from which his heart had been taken still glowed faintly, just enough to remind the others. A warning, a beacon. The others were waking. All around them, the statues shifted. Not abruptly, not violently, but deliberately. Heads tilted, hands twitched, toes curled against soft soil. The sound was faint, but constant, like the creak of wood in a house that had been left alone too long. But this was not abandonment. This was memory. They remembered now who they were, who had taken from them, and what they were meant to become. Far beyond the edge of the park, on the street where normal life still pretended to exist, a girl walked home alone. Her backpack hung heavy on her shoulder. Earbuds drowned out the night. She didn't notice the chill that wasn't weather, didn't see the way the lamplight flickered before she passed beneath it. But she stopped. Something drew her gaze across the road, toward the trees. toward the park. The gate stood open. The gravel path beckoned. She took a step forward, eyes wide, unblinking. From deep inside the trees, something exhaled, a long, wet breath. She blinked, and in that blink, the statues moved. Not much, just enough. One figure stepped out of the shadows, arms low, head tilted. It had once been a boy named Eli. Now it was only memory, and it watched her. Not with malice, not with kindness, with purpose. She took another step. The statues breathed. All at once, in, out. The girl trembled. Her name whispered through the trees, low and drawn out. She turned, ready to run, but her reflection in the dark window of the shop beside her didn't turn with her. It stayed still, smiling. And behind that reflection, a hand, stone fingers resting on her shoulder. Then darkness and breath.